Today we are going to be making the winter wheat sweater scarf. This uses that beautiful winter's wheat stitch repeat that I came up with, and we're going to make it in a cozy sweater scarf that is completely customizable. But I have written the pattern to include sizes extra small to 5X, but once again, feel free to adjust the size to your body measurements. Today you will need to have the Color Theory Two of Wands Lion brand yarn or something similar. When it comes to substituting yarn, be sure to always check your gauge. And I have a blog post dedicated to substituting yarns and what you need to know. This is a medium 4 weight. Sometimes it works up a little bit lighter than that. It is an acrylic yarn and you'll need quite a bit of it for each size. I've included the yarn requirements of each size in the written pattern. You will also want a tape measure. This is really smart as you get going to know how to get this best to fit your body or what type of width you want. You want a couple stitch markers to mark the ends of your rows, scissors to cut those ends, a yarn needle to weave those in, and a 5mm H crochet hook. Now I just want to note that I did make this in black. Obviously very hard to see on camera, beautiful in person, but I'm not going to be filming in this black because way too hard to film in this. But I did want a black one. I used the Lion brand Heartland yarn, which is really close to that Color Theory. So you can read your stash and do a quick gauge check and see if you have something that would work. Now here is a tip when you are working with yarn that might unravel on the ends. We're going to be working a very large piece and you may not come back to weave in your ends later. So it's never a bad idea to just go ahead and make a knot, tighten that down. And then when you're ready to weave in your ends, you're going to cut above that knot with a fresh start of yarn that's not so untwisted, because this will completely untwist as I work. And that's a little bit harder to get onto a needle. So we're going to go ahead and leave ourselves a tail end to weave in later. Create a slip knot and place that onto your hook. Now I'm just making a swatch. If you want to follow along with the 200 and something plus chain stitches for your sweater scarf, feel free. But just on camera today, so that you know if you want to do a swatch, this is a stitch multiple of 2 plus a turning chain. Now I have chained a total of 25 chains, and we are going to go ahead and start to work in the second chain from the hook. Now when it comes to that turning chain, I like to tighten it down just a little bit and then rotate my chain row, and working in those back humps, I'm going to single crochet in the second chain from the hook and then in all the remaining stitches across. So at the end of the row 1, you will have an even stitch count. So for me, I will have a total of 24 single crochet stitches at the end of row 1. Now I have 24 stitches at the end of row 1. And if you want, place a stitch marker in the first stitch of each row so that you know when you are starting and stopping that row. When we start to work those puff stitches, I highly advise it because you might get lost. So for row 2, we are going to turn our work. Chain 1, and this is our turning chain. It does not count as a stitch. And then we are going to be working in the back loop only, single crocheting into each stitch across. Now when it comes to working in the back loop only, we're going to look at that anatomy of a stitch. So if we look at one of the stitches here, we see that we have a V on the top of our work. And we would insert our crochet hook through underneath both of those V's if we were working a regular single crochet. But since we're working in the back loop, we're going to skip that front loop and go right into just that back loop. And that's how we're going to work our single crochet stitches for this row. So we will single crochet in the back loop only all the way across. Our stitch count is going to remain the same for all the rows of this sweater scarf body. So we're not going to be changing our stitch count ever. So I still have 24 stitches. Now after doing rows 1 and 2, now we're in for the fun part, which is row 3. And row 3 is where we're going to be working those beautiful puff stitches. So to start row 3, we're going to turn our work, chain 1, and single crochet into the first stitch. I find it easier if we give ourselves a buffer at the beginning and the end of the row to always start and stop with a single crochet stitch. We are going to skip the next stitch and single crochet into the next. So we skipped one, and then we've single crocheted into the next. And now we are going to go back to that skipped stitch. And that skipped stitch is right here. This is the stitch that we skipped. We're going to yarn over, insert into the skipped stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop. And we want to pull up that loop to be the height of our first loop on our hook. Yarn over, insert into that stitch again, yarn over and pull up a loop. We now have a total of 5 loops on the hook. We're going to yarn over and pull through 4 of those loops, and then yarn over and pull through the remaining 2. And that's our modified puff stitch. And this is going to be our stitch repeat until we get to the last stitch in this row. So we will skip a stitch, single crochet into the next, working back into that skip stitch, we will yarn over, insert our hook, yarn over and pull up a loop, pulling it up to the height of the first loop on the hook, yarn over, and then we will insert into the same skip stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop to the same height. We have 5 loops on our hook, and now we are going to yarn over and pull through the first 4 loops, yarn over and pull through the remaining 2. So that is a 2-stitch repeat across until we get to the last stitch of this row. Once you get in the groove of it, it can go quite quickly, and it's a relaxing stitch repeat. Now I am to the last puff of the row, and I still have 1 stitch after this to work. So we've worked that puff stitch repeat all the way across, and we have 1 stitch left, and that's where we will single crochet into that last stitch and turn our work. So now we have done row 3, and we are going to work on row 4. Row 4 is the same. It is a repeat of row 3. So we're going to chain 1, single crochet into the first stitch, skip the next, and single crochet into the next stitch. Working back into that skip stitch, we will do our modified puff stitch, and then repeat those 2 stitches across all the way until the end. And you'll notice that these puff stitches don't perfectly line up intentionally. They're a little bit offset to make them a bit more organic, and it looks really pretty. So I'm going to do a couple more here so we can see the direction that we're headed in. We're just paying attention to these stitches and working them the same way as row 3. We can start to see this pattern coming alive. It is a 4-row repeat. So we see that we have, this is our 4th row, and we can see this will be the pattern that we will keep repeating. But I'm going to keep going for a couple more rows so you can see the repeat for the sweater scarf. Now I'm at the end of row 4, completing that last puff stitch, and the last stitch of the row is a single crochet. And now we are going to chain 1 and turn our work, and we're going to be doing rows 5 and 6. This is the wrong side of the work, and this is the right side of the work. That may be hard to tell right now, but this ridge line will stay on the right side of the work where we don't see that on the back. Now for rows 5 and 6, we are going to chain 1 and single crochet in the back loop only for every single stitch across. So single crochet in the back loop only for row 5 and row 6. Now as I come to the end of row 6, we can see this beautiful stitch pattern. Now this is a 4-row repeat plus 2 rows that we started with. So rows 3, 4, 5, and 6 are going to be our repeat for the sweater scarf, and rows 1 and 2 are our starting rows. And this is what we're going to do until we make a very large and very long fabric that will wrap around our body, just like I have done with this color of yarn for this sweater scarf. I can't even fit the entire thing on camera because it's so long. It's not too wide, but it's very, very long. And once you have this as a very long piece of rectangle fabric, we will be working on the sleeves. Now, your very first sleeve, you won't have to fasten off. Your yarn will be right where it needs to be to do this ribbing. But I've already done the ribbing on one side, and I also like to seam it up a little bit farther into the sleeve area so that it really covers over my elbow. So I'm going to show you how to do this on the other side. And this is such a simple construction. This is it. So once you crochet the body and you do the 2 sleeves, you are done. Now after chaining 41, and it does look kind of funny, we've got this long chain sticking off the edge here. We are going to tighten down that last turning chain, and in the second chain from the hook, we will single crochet in each stitch across. And I do like to use that bottom hump once again. I think it looks really nice. You can always place a stitch marker on the first stitch of your ribbing so that you know where we will end this row when we come back. So I'm simply going to single crochet down this chain. We will have a total of 40 stitches. But I just want to know, if you're trying this on, you can see where this hits you, the way you want to wear it, and you can add more chains or take chains out to make this section longer or shorter on where you want it to hit on your arm. Now after single crocheting back down that long chain, we have 40 single crochet stitches, and now we're going to be slip stitching along the edge here. Now this is called join as you go ribbing, but this will be done a little bit different because this width of our edge will be too wide to go around our cuff. Now, if you want a really wide sleeve, you could just slip stitch 1 slip stitch per row and be fine. It just depends on what you want. But if you want a more fitted ribbed sleeve, we will need to do less slip stitches along this edge than there are rows. So for this first part, we'll have to keep track of our rows here. So when we see this ridge, we've got 2 single crochet rows there, and then we've got 2 puff stitch rows. But we are going to slip stitch along this edge for the first about 3 rows. So I've done 2 slip stitches across 3 rows for this very first part of this. And then we'll turn our work, skip those 2 slip stitches, and single crochet in the back loop only for the 40 stitches across. I'm going to come back and I'm going to show that edge slip stitch again, and then we're going to talk about adjusting the tightness of this ribbing around your arm. Now as I come to the end of row 2, I've single crocheted the back loop only for each stitch across. Then we will turn our work, and we're going to work back down towards the body of this sweater scarf. So we will start by chaining 1, and then we're going to single crochet in the back loop only for each stitch all the way down. Now you may have caught that on these edge stitches, I single crochet through both loops. I find it makes it a little bit cleaner, but it's not that big of a difference if you don't. So single crochet across these single crochet stitches, working in the back loop only all the way across the 40 stitches, or however many you've adjusted to, until we get back to the body of this sweater scarf. And now that we are back down to this edge, we are going to slip stitch across the next 2 edge rows and then turn our work. And then skip those 2 slip stitches and single crochet in the back loop only all the way across. So this ribbing is quite simple to do in the rows. It's relaxing, watch a movie. But I want to talk about adjusting this for the width if you want. So the way I've written the pattern, I have it to where it's a 4-row repeat. And once when you come down like we did here, you will slip stitch across 3 rows, 2 slip stitches across 3 rows. And then when you come back towards the body again, you'll do a slip stitch, 2 slip stitches per 2 rows. And we'll alternate between those, which means in the end we will have less slip stitches along the edge here than we have rows. Now this is always open to interpretation when it comes to ribbing. The reason why I say that is I have never met a crocheter that has the same gauge with ribbing very often. Ribbing can get a little bit fickly. Our tension can change very easily. And it can have a different amount of stretch. So here's what I think. I've given a guide on how to get to what I think will be the right amount of ribbing to go around your arm. But I would pay attention to, your arm width, and you want to measure right before your elbow. You want to make sure that we're checking before our elbow because our wrist is really small usually, but our Elbow is where this is going to go up to because it's a longer ribbing, so you want to do the widest part of your arm. But you can keep testing it as you go, holding it up to your arm, thinking like, okay, this is how much I have left. I'm gonna have quite a few more rows. It's gonna fit great. Or maybe I want to slip stitch across 3 rows quite a few times in here. That way it comes in tighter. Maybe I want a tighter ribbing because I have more narrow, slim arms. If we find that this is gonna be too tight on our upper arm, we want to make sure that maybe we are slip stitching 1 per row for a little while to make sure that this is going to fit just right. So depending on how many slip stitches you do on the edge will depend on how much it gathers in for that sleeve ribbing. So feel free to adjust and get it just right for you. However, keep track of how many rows you did on the very first sleeve, because you will want to do the same amount of rows on the second sleeve so that your sleeves match up. We don't want one wide sleeve and one narrow sleeve. So I'm going to work these across, and then I'll come back and show you what that looks like and show you how to join this so it looks more like a sweater scarf. Now, once you have the amount of ribbing rows that you like, and once again, you can always take stitch markers and pin it together, try it on your arm, see if you like it for the amount of stretch you want. You might want it looser, you might want it tighter, and that's all going to depend on how many you slip stitch along this edge. And the nice thing is this fabric is so forgiving that you can play around with that, and you can add more rows or take out rows to be perfect for your fit. But when we're ready to join our current row with our last row, I like to have the right side facing me and then fold that together. And then we're going to be working along the row that we currently are on and our first row of this ribbing. So I'm going to enter into the back loop only of the very first row we did, and then through the back loop only of the current row, yarn over and slip stitch together. Now, if you had done this a little bit differently and you want to have the wrong side facing you and then slip stitch it together, that's fine. Your slip stitch will show on the right side of your work, but you can do it either way. It's just that when you fold it the opposite way, you're going to be working through your current row first, not your first row. But I'm going to be working through my first row, then my current row, through that back loop only, yarning over and slip stitching those stitches together. And we will do that for all the ribbing stitches across on this piece. And then I'm going to come back because we're going to talk about doing a few more slip stitches up the yarn to customize this to be the fit that we are after. Now, after slip stitching across all the ribbing stitches, if you would like, you can keep working up the side of this sweater scarf. Still just doing the slip stitches in the same way. So the back loop of the row closest to me, the back loop of the row farthest away. This is where you can take this and you can try it on. Grab a stitch marker, and you can always pin after you put it on to place where you want your seam to come to. I liked working up this a little bit farther because I found that it would stay a little bit over my elbow more, which is what I wanted, a little bit extra warmth around my arms, but it's completely up to you. You can stop at the ribbing. Now, once you have worked that seaming to the point you want, you can go ahead and fasten off that yarn, weave it in. I like to weave back and forth a little bit here on the inside to make sure that if this is really getting a lot of use, it's not going to pull on this seam too much. I'm really going to make sure that seam is secured and not going to, break that fabric in any way or pull that seam open. And then I'll just simply weave in all of my ends, and then we will be flipping this back to the right side facing so that we have that right side facing out. And now we have a stunning, absolutely gorgeous sweater scarf. This texture goes great with so many outfits. It can really pop even just with a simple pair of jeans. The nice thing about this is even though it does have a little bit of a fancy look to me, this is also casual. You can dress it up or dress it down as much as you want. If you're rushing out the door to take a kid to a bus stop or school, you can throw this on. You'll look totally put together simply by adding this accessory to your wardrobe. And it will help during, evenings in the summer by the campfire when there's a little bit of a chill, or during those cooler months. You can even wear it indoors. This is completely versatile. And there are lots of different ways to wear this, so be sure to check out that style gallery and hit that subscribe button to come back for some more fun projects soon.